Hello everyone, so today we are going to talk about the scapula. The scapula is a flat triangular bone which it's found on the posterior aspect of the body and it articulates with the humerus as well as with the clavicle, and it's also in contact with the ribs starting from the second all the way to the seventh rib of the thorax. It's also one of the bones of the pectoral girdle. Now, let's talk a little bit about the parts of the scapula. So you get the acromion over here, which is basically the continuation of the spine, which you can see over here. Okay. What you also get is the body. Okay, so this entire area is the body. So this is the posterior aspect. This is the anterior aspect of the scapula. You get the glenoid cavity. That's where the head of the humerus articulates within the glenoid cavity. You get the neck of the scapula. And then you also get the coracoid process, which is a very important place, especially for the attachment of different muscles for their origination. Now let's talk a little bit about the borders. So you get three borders. You have your lateral border, which obviously faces laterally. You get your medial border, which faces medially. And you also get the superior border. So let's have a look at it from different angles. Right, so that's all regarding the borders of the scapula. Now let's move on to the angles. You get three angles. You have the superior angle. Again, it's very important for the insertion of a muscle called the levator scapular muscle. You also get the inferior angle. Okay, this is important for the origin of the teres major muscle. And you also get the lateral angle over here. Okay, so that would be all in terms of angles. Now let's have a look at the subdivisions of the costal surface as well as the subdivisions of the posterior surface. So on the anterior surface, you get the subscapular fossa, and this is important for the origin of the subscapularis muscle. So the subscapularis muscle occupies this entire pink area of the scapula. So that would be all in terms of subdivisions of the costal surface. Now let's have a look at the subdivisions of the posterior surface. Now the posterior surface is divided by the spine of the scapula, which would be this one over here. And as you can see, as I mentioned earlier, the spine gives rise to the acromion, okay, which again is important for the attachment of another bone, the clavicle, through the acromioclavicular joint. Now, I did mention that the spine divides the posterior surface, divides the posterior surface into further subdivisions. So what are those subdivisions? We get the supraspinous fossa, which is the origin for the supraspinatus muscle. And we also get the infraspinous fossa, which is this one over here. So for the infraspinous fossa, you get the origin of the infraspinatus muscle. So there are two muscles on the posterior aspect. You get the infraspinatus within the infraspinous fossa, and you also get the supraspinatus from the supraspinous fossa. While on the anterior aspect or costal surface, you get the subscapularis muscle. Okay, so that would be all in terms of subdivisions. What we need to talk about now, so we mentioned a little bit about the glenoid cavity earlier on, which we said that it was the articular fossa where the head of the humerus inserts into. So basically that gives rise then to the shoulder joint, The shoulder joint is made by the glenoid cavity of the scapula and the head of the humerus. What we also get is the infraglenoid tubercle, which is the place of origin of the long head of the triceps brachii. So like the name says, infraglenoid, you'd also tend to get a supraglenoid tubercle, which is found on the posterior aspect, sorry, on the superior aspect of the glenoid cavity. And that's a place for the origin of the long head of the biceps brachii. So you can see that both the supraglenoid tubercle as well as the infraglenoid tubercles are important for the origins of two muscles. So both of them are long heads, but the supraglenoid is for the biceps brachii, while the infraglenoid is for the long head of the triceps. So we also talked about a little bit about the neck of the scapula earlier. Now, what we have here is the coracoid process. So this is very important, like I mentioned before. It's for the origins of a variety of different muscles. We have the coracobrachialis, the short head of the biceps brachii. We have the insertion of the pectoralis minor. It's also used for the attachment of ligaments. So we have the coracoacromial ligament, the coracoclavicular ligament, and coracohumeral ligament. So it's very important for the attachment of muscles and ligaments. So there are two the important notches within the scapula that you need to know about, and those are the suprascapular notch. So let's have a look at it from both sides. But normally you typically tend to see the suprascapular notch from the posterior aspect. And what you find here, it's a ligament called the superior transverse scapular ligament. And what you find going underneath this ligament through the notch is the suprascapular nerve. While on top of the ligament, you tend to find an artery and a vein. That will be the suprascapular artery and the suprascapular vein. So what happens to these three structures? They pass through the suprascapular notch and they travel over here within this area. And this area is called the sphenoglenoid notch. Again, this has a ligament as well. So we met the superior transverse scapular ligament within the suprascapular notch. So that means that within the sphenoglenoid notch, we'll find the inferior transverse scapular ligament. And what you tend to find underneath the ligament are all three structures. So you find the suprascapular nerve, the suprascapular artery, as well as the vein. So that will be the difference between the suprascapular notch and sphenoglenoid notch. All three structures pass underneath the ligaments, while on the suprascapular notch, you get the nerve passing underneath the ligament and the artery and the vein passing above the ligament. So that would be all for the scapula. I hope you guys have enjoyed today's video, and if you did, drop a like down below, subscribe to the channel. I'll be releasing more and more videos regarding the human body. So I'll catch you guys on the next one.